So the two models of inter-process communication, there are two processes. There is process A and there is a process B, and these processes want to communicate with each other. What they want to do? They want to communicate with each other, and between them to communicate we have a shared memory. Now in this, process A is the producer and process B is the consumer. So process A will produce the information and process B will consume the information. Now where will the process A produce the information? It will produce it inside the shared memory. Inside the shared memory we have a region called the buffer. Inside this buffer, process A will produce the information. So inside the buffer, process A produces information. Produces the information, and after it has produced the information, process B will consume from this buffer, will consume information from this buffer, information from this buffer. So process B will go and consume the information. So what will process A do? Process A will give the information and process B will go and consume the information. So produce and consume. And where does this take place? This takes place inside the shared memory. So what is a shared memory? An area of memory which is shared among the processes that wish to communicate. So whatever the processes that wish to communicate, we had process A and process B. These two processes were wishing to communicate with each other. The communication is under the control of the user processes, not the operating system. So it is under the control of the user processes means it is under the control of process A and process B. It is not under the control of the operating system. The processes are also responsible for ensuring that they are not writing to the same location simultaneously. That means once process A will complete its execution or will produce the data, once process A produces the data, only then process B will be allowed. Only then process B is allowed. Major issue is to provide the mechanism that will allow the user process to synchronize their actions when they access the shared memory. Now shared memory, a process produces information. So there is a producer process which produces the information. So in our case it was the process A which was producing the information. So we had process A which was producing the information, and it is consumed by the consumer process. So consumer process is the process B is consuming it. To allow the consumer and the producer process to run concurrently, when I say concurrently, one after the other, first the process A has to produce, then only the process B can consume. We must have an available buffer of items that will be filled by the producer and emptied by the consumer. So inside this buffer, who fills the buffer? The consumer will empty the buffer and the filling will be done by the producer. So producer fills the buffer, consumer empties the buffer. Process A fills the buffer, process B empties the buffer. This buffer will reside in a region of memory. So it will reside in the shared memory that is shared by the producer and consumer processes. So where will it reside? It will reside under this. Where will the buffer be present? Inside the shared memory. A producer can produce one item while the consumer is consuming another item. The producer and consumer must be synchronized so that the consumer does not try to consume an item that has not been produced yet. So it should be synchronized to ensure that process B will not consume any kind of item beforehand. So now shared memory. There are two types of buffer can be used, unbounded buffer and bounded buffer. So in this shared memory you have what? You have the buffer. Inside the buffer you have one process which will fill the information, and one process which will empty the information. The person who will fill the information, we say that it is a producer processor. The process will empty, we say that it is a consumer processor. So that means that this buffer is very, very important. So let's see what are the two types. There are unbounded buffer and bounded buffer. The unbounded buffer places no practical limit on the size of the buffer. The consumer may wait for new items, but the producer can always produce new items. So there is no limit. The producer can go on producing how much ever amount the producer process wants to produce. Bounded buffer will assume a fixed buffer size. The consumer must wait if the buffer is empty, and the producer must wait if the buffer is full. It cannot go on producing the items as in case of the unbounded buffer. In the unbounded you don't have limit. Go on producing how much ever you want to produce, but in the bounded buffer there is a limit. If that limit is reached, so limit has reached, then the producer must wait. It can't go on producing. So in case of shared memory, you have a process A, you have a process B. There is a shared memory between the two processes to communicate. Process A will act as a producer process, and it will give the data or give the information inside the shared memory buffer area. And process B will, after the process A has given up the information, then process B, what it will do? It will go and consume the information from the buffer. And process B will wait till the process A has not produced the information. It will not go and consume the information which has not been produced yet. So there are two types of buffer. One is your unbounded buffer and one is the bounded buffer. In case of the unbounded buffer, what happens? In case of unbounded buffer, you don't have any limit given to the producer. So you don't have limit given to the process A, has no limit. In case of a bounded buffer, process A will have a limit. If already lot of information has been shared, then till the consumer does not consume all the information, new information cannot be produced. So in case of bounded buffer, we ensure that whole information has been consumed first, buffer is not full, then only the producer will produce. Okay, so this is all about shared memory under interprocess communication.